All right, we got the scarf joint glued up, and you can see that it's uneven there. So what we're going to need to do is go back to the joiner and flatten this out so that our fretboard will fit on there perfectly. This is another one of those things, don't try this at home. All right, so now you can see it's nice and flat. The fretboard will go up to about there. And next thing we need to do is get the truss rod fitted. So back here with the table saw. I use a dual action truss rod because it's just a smarter way to do things. Means it can push it one way or the other. And what's nice about this is that it makes it easier and more precise way for me to do this, because what I do is I put it halfway between the fretboard and the neck so that it works as a key. When I get done and go to glue this on there, then the location is not a problem. But the first thing I have to do is cut a dado essentially down the middle of this and down the middle of that, which means I have to put on the dado blade and another blade change. So endless. It's endless blade changing. So the first thing I'm going to do is the inside of the fretboard. You notice I haven't tapered this fretboard yet. It's square, and by keeping it square, it allows me to do this with a degree of precision. If it had to taper on it, it would be a lot more difficult to do this. So I'm cutting it straight down the middle, and I'm only going to go about a third of the depth of this. I want to get that top piece kind of in there. It's another reason why I have a thicker fretboard, is I can do this. So what am I doing here? I'm trying to just get a height, a good eyeball on that. It's a good start. Then I need to find the center of this, which is we'll call that 64 millimeters. So the middle of that would be 32. I'm going to go 32 down in the center of the dado blade. The dado blade is, how wide is that? Just about, it's less than a quarter inch. Something 30/2 of an inch. But I've used this dado blade set up specifically for this for 20 years. It hasn't changed. And all it does is cut this slot. It'll never go dull. So I want it to be right down the middle. And I want to be careful that I don't cut myself. Do it twice just so I know I got it perfectly. And that's good enough depth. Now I need to cut the remainder of the depth in this side, which gets a little bit trickier. The first thing I need to do is find the depth, set the depth. And I'll do that by using a scrap piece of wood. Yeah, that's pretty good. Got lucky on the first try. Yeah, we'll go with that. So, this time I have to run down the center of this. The problem is I've got this stagger here, so how do you get around that? Well, first thing, let's find the center. And this is just under 64. And I need to have a spacer for this, which this works perfectly. Okay, this is the way it works. This thing will be my spacer that'll also be a push stick in a way that'll go off of the fence, and we'll be able to beat this stagger and cut the dado right down the middle of that neck. So here we go. Usually I have to do this 2 or 3 times because this wood is hard. One more, just for good measure. A quirky thing about these truss rods is the nut on here is a little bit fatter than the rod itself, so you have to do a little trick here to kind of drill out about that much to give room for this thing to drop in there. But I can still figure if I got the right depth by doing this, and everything looks good. We do not want to go over there and start gluing and have this thing not deep enough. And you don't want it to be too deep. I think I might have to do it one more time, a little bit more. You don't want it to be too deep because then it rattles. There's ways to prevent the rattle, but we don't want rattle, and we definitely want it to be able to fit in there, not to be not to be too shallow of a dado. So we're going to do one more, a little bit deeper, just a hair. Certainly do it. Right, so it's in there and it's the way it should be. What I need to do is cut this little piece out here, and then the slot will be ready. The next thing we need to do is taper. I got the truss rod in there. I had to make a little space for the nut, and now we're going to cut the taper on the fretboard using these little jigs. Drawing the lines on here as an approximation of what the width should be. They're not. I'm not gonna cut to the lines, but I put them there just so I know that I'm in the right ballpark, and so I don't make a mistake. Here's another one of my jigs. We need to match the taper of the pocket, which this jig is for. And I'm going to check my taper against this. This is the actual piece where it has to fit into, and I'm going to check it against that also. Ultimately, I don't want it to be perfect fit here. I'd rather it was a little bit wide, because in the process of finishing the neck, there's going to be a certain amount of sanding and it's going to get narrower and narrower, and I'd rather have it fit nice and perfectly at the end than right, now. But if it does fit perfectly now, I'm not going to argue. So, first thing we do is cut the first side roughly. Now, to do the other side, I got another piece, which is the same taper as this one. Match them up, and then you compensate. Since this is no longer a right angle on one side, I got to compensate for that anglage. So, what we do this time is we put two of them together, turn it around, cut the other side. Again, roughly. Check it often. Still well within the boundaries of the pencil line, so let's just go. And I'll go back and forth with this until it finally fits. Alright, a little loose. I have a feeling it'll be perfect for here. Yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be perfect. So we got that done. This is critical because now I can use this as a trace to cut the rest of the neck to match. You'll see later. Now, people wonder, why the scarf joint? Well, the scarf joint is the superior way to get an angled headstock with strength. If you have one piece of wood, you have what's called a grain runout. You have, depending on the grain on the piece of wood that would be your neck, it gets to this angle and there's a weak point there where the grain runs out, and that's where it'll break. And that's the problem you have with a lot of Gibson headstocks. They have a very steep angle, I think sometimes like 17-degree angle, which puts, exposes more grain, the weakest part of the wood, to that fracture. And so what happens with them is usually it falls forward like that, and the snapping of it pops it forward, since it's already under tension with strings anyway. Like it falls off of the stand and goes forward, crack, snap. This way you've got grain going here, then it changes direction and goes that way, so you don't get any grain run out. You don't have the problem of a snapping headstock. Now, if you used quarter sawn wood, you probably wouldn't have that problem if it's a solid piece of quarter sawn wood. But quarter sawn wood's hard to come by. And nobody in the industry is going to use it because it's not an efficient way to cut a log down to get the lumber out of it. Most lumber is either going to be a rift cut or it's going to be flat sawn, which is kind of like a rift cut is halfway between a quarter sawn and a flat sawn, so it has like an angle cut to it. I prefer using flat sawn because that's a direction the wood will move that's controllable with the truss rod. Now, you never really know what a piece of wood's going to do. I mean, you can kind of tell, but you don't know. I mean, down the line, it could start bending in ways you never suspected. That's why a lot of people just leave their wood laying around for a long time so you can see what it's going to do. And if it starts twisting, that's trouble. If it bends one way or other, that's kind of controllable and understood. If you have flat sawn, let's say this is flat sawn, it's going to bend either this way or it's going to bend that way. That's controllable with the truss rod. If you have a quarter sawn where the grain is perpendicular, it's going to move this way or that way, and you can't control that with a truss rod. So that's why I'm a little bit shy about using quarter sawn, besides the fact that it's just hard to come by. I think flat sawn's the way to go. Rift cut, which is like that angle cut, it can do screwy things. I mean, sometimes it's fine, but a lot of times it's the type of stuff that'll corkscrew on you. And on a neck, you don't want that. I mean, if it's in a body, other parts, if it's a piece of furniture, that's fine. But if on a neck, you want the neck is, it's pretty critical that it remains straight and controllable. So I go to the trouble, I should say, to make a scarf joint because it is a superior way to put the angle on the head. Now, Fender didn't do that. Fender just made it straight out. There's no angle on it. And that's a brilliant design. The only problem is then you have to have string things to hold it down, and it's just not elegant. I mean, it's a great solution. This is more elegant, is the way I look at it. And I prefer to do it this way. People look at the scarf joint and they think it's dumb or they think it's cheap because so many import guitars do it, and they think, well, they're just trying to save lumber. Well, it's true, you don't need to have big massive chunks of lumber to do it. It's also not easy to do. So it's not an inferior way to do things. It takes a great degree of precision. The Japanese guitar makers, even the Chinese necks that I've had, they've got it down. They know how to do it really well. And they've figured out a system in manufacturing that works very well for them, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a better way to do things. Classical guitars, traditional acoustic guitars do a different way than I do. If you notice on mine, the cut is back behind the nut. On a classical guitar, on acoustic guitars, they'll have the scarf up closer to the head. Well, the problem there is the scarf joint is kind of a compromised joint. I mean, you can't, if you're going to glue wood together, you want to do it, where the grain is matching in the same direction, this way, that way. It's going to glue perfectly. You can't butt glue anything because that's like gluing the ends of straws together. It's not going to hold. A scarf joint is kind of a compromise. It's half of this and it's half of that. So it's not the strongest joint in the world. And I would be worried about an electric guitar having it sitting out there on its own with the tuners. That's a weak point in the joint itself. The way I build them, it's sandwiched underneath that fretboard so that it's not going anywhere. And again, another reason why I have a thicker fretboard is because it becomes more of a structural support for the whole neck. It's buried in that sandwich right there, and it's not going to go anywhere. And the neck that got driven over by the truck, it's still intact. It didn't break. It snapped in the middle of the neck. It did nothing, no damage up here. So I figured out a way, and this isn't my invention. This is commonly done, but this is the best way to do a scarf joint. It's not easy. It's time consuming, but it makes for a superior neck joint, and it allows you to have a tilted angle. Now, my angle, it's about 10 degrees. That's because my thicker fretboard adds a few more degrees to it. By the time it comes off of that top of that nut, there's going to be more degrees added. So it's probably closer to like 12 degrees, 13 degrees in the end. So I can get away with it because of the way I build them. There. So now, next is glue up time.